Hello and welcome back to my channel, Simply Living Suffolk, where I, a sketty millennial, talk about all the books I read while procrastinating from the things I needed to do. And I'm going to do an October wrap up. It's the 4th of November now. It's a few days into November, but I can now do my October wrap up, and I've written it down on a piece of paper here, so if I keep looking down, that's why. I was gonna wear like a cute little cardigan and be all like autumnal and like cozy, but I have overheated myself trying to set up the camera at an okay angle. And Monty's behind me. Okay, welcome to my October wrap up. So I hopefully will be able to superimpose my Storygraph stats here in a second. If I don't, I'll read them out to you. Depends on my editing skills. So in October I read 6 books, a total of 2,026 pages, so each book averaged 338 pages, and it took me about 4 days to finish each book. I mainly read reflective and funny books, and they were all fiction. You might remember from my last video I was reading a Carla's book, but I didn't finish it by the end of October. So the first book I read was Orlando by Virginia Woolf. This was for book club, which was at the beginning of October, and I rated it 4 stars. It's 240 pages, it's not very long. It's an LGBTQIA plus literary magical realism. That's a bit of a mouthful. Magical literary realism, I think that makes more sense. Which I love. Love magical realism, kind of giving 100 Years of Solitude, where there's like some magic, but it's kind of not the main point, I suppose, of the book. And so this, I briefly mentioned this in the last video, so this follows a trans character. Sort of trans, not really trans. It's kind of magical trans from when it was written. It starts out as a male lead, and one day he wakes up and is a woman, and then lives the rest of his life, the rest of her life, as a woman. And it's kind of a love letter to Virginia Woolf's partner, Vita Sackville West, because in the book, Orlando has to go through legal battles to get her family, lands and property because it can't pass to a woman. And so she goes through all of the legal battles and eventually succeeds and gets to keep all her land and titles and money. And so it's kind of a lovely letter to Vita Sackville West, because the same happened to her in real life, but she didn't actually get to keep her land. So it's kind of like trying to right that wrong, I think, in the book. But it's also a bit of a piss take, because quite a lot of the book takes the piss out of poets, which Vita Sackville West was. But yeah, loved that. And I finished that on the 6th of October, which is the date of book club, because I'm nothing if not a last minute girly. The next book I read, which I borrowed from my friend and I've already given it back, so hopefully I can put a picture of it here. If not, imagine it, was Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney, and I finished that on the 14th of October. That was 356 pages and was a contemporary literary romance, and I rated it 3.25 stars, which I'm going to be honest is quite low for me. I am very much a vibes rater, and it's not always about what actually happens in the book, or like I can never really remember, and it's not whether it's actually written that well, it's just whether I like the vibes. And for this one, so it followed 4 people. It's very similar to a lot of Sally Rooney's other books, where it kind of is set in Ireland and it follows like people going through relationships. So it followed 4 people across 2 relationships. I found the sex scenes quite awkward. Well, very awkward. There was a lot of dialogue for the sex scenes, and very like I don't know. It didn't feel. It felt maybe I don't know how to explain it. I wasn't a fan, but also spoiler alert if you haven't read it. At the end, the epilogue talks about COVID, and also someone's pregnant, and they are like two things that make me massively rate a book down, because any reference to COVID, I just feel like I suppose it was such a big thing that I can see why people are referring it to in their books, but it kind of dates a book a bit more than I want it to. And also, like, I read books for escapism. I don't really want to think about a horrible pandemic. And also, like, pregnancy trope is just not for me. I don't know why, it's just not, like, it just gives me the ick every time I read about it. So I gave it 3.25, which is quite harsh of me, because I think conversation with friends and normal people, I probably would have rated higher than that, 4+. Next book I read was a library book, which has been returned. Insert image here if I can. Which I finished on the 15th of October, so I'm obviously reading them at the same time, and that was The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sangu Mandana, and I rated it 5 stars. Loved it. It was 318 pages and it was contemporary fantasy romance, and basically my notes here say it was cosy, autumnal and local. So Sangu, the author, lives in Norwich, I believe, which is near me. I'm in Suffolk, and the book was set in rural Norfolk. So I loved it purely because it was very local to me, and kind of the setting, the scene felt very realistic to what the kind of like life I live. I live in a small town in Suffolk. This was more like completely rural, but I loved it, and it was following a witch. So again, it's fantasy in terms of there's witches exist, but they're kind of in hiding, and this witch, she does YouTube videos pretending she's a witch, but she actually is a witch, but she thinks no one's going to know she's a witch because she's doing it on YouTube. Anyway, she goes to this rural house and helps teach these 3 young witches magic. And it's very cute and it's very autumnal, and there's like a little bit of a love interest. It's like a grumpy sunshine, and there's a day trip to Norwich, and it was just, I gobbled it up. Nom, 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 nom. I read it like, I think in 2 days. It was great. Okay, I'm gonna be honest about the next one. I read it on my Kindle. Okay, here's the backstory. My friend sent an Instagram reel into the book club chat, and it was someone, I can't remember their name. If I can find it, I will write it here, but they were talking about a book called Halloween by Holly Wilde, which was an erotica, and the reel was really funny. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it a go. It was on Kindle Unlimited. I decided to get a 30-day free trial. It was 85 pages long. I read it in 2 sittings. I would have read it in 1, but I had to do the school run. And I gave it 5 stars. It was hilarious. Like, honestly, kicking my legs, howling, laughing. So Holly Wilde writes a lot of sentient romances. So we're like sentient, like making objects sentient. So this one was like 2 short stories in 1 book, and the first one was about sentient pumpkins or jack-o'-lanterns, and there's this like basically very quickly this person says something into a mirror 3 times and gets taken to another world where there's these 3 human, pumpkins that are sentient like people, and there's like a male, female scene, and their expulsions taste like pumpkin spice latte. When I say I was crying laughing when I was reading this, and then I got a pumpkin spice latte a few days later, and I was like, I can't, they've ruined this drink for me. And then the second story in that is about Candyman. Again, it's a sentient person made of candy, and there's a scene, and then the condom, his expulsion, is gummy bears, and she eats them. It was hilarious. I loved it. And this is what I mean when I say I will rate things on vibes. I rated it 5 stars, and objectively it is not an impressive literary feat, but it is bloody funny and I really enjoyed myself. So because I loved it so much, obviously I read another one. I read Banging My Birthday Bear, excuse me, by Holly Wilde. Again, insert picture here if I can. And again, I gave that 5 stars. That's another one of her sentient romances, eroticas. It's 46 pages long, again, hilarious. And it's about a teddy bear, as you can imagine. He becomes human and the bit that got me so much was the female main character was celebrating her 30th birthday. She had sexual relations with a sentient life-size teddy bear who then spaffed out all of his stuffing, which tasted like candy floss, until he was back to being a miniature bear. I'm sorry because I feel like I've just spoiled all of these stories for anyone if they want to read them, but honestly, I feel like you just don't get it until you read it. It's hilarious. And also there are so many more. So please read them for your own sake. If you like it, if you're not afraid of spice, they're friggin' hilarious. And then the 6th book, back to a bit more highbrow. I read The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry. This is one I borrowed from my mum, which I need to return, but I haven't done it yet because I haven't seen it yet. It was 432 pages and I rated it 4 stars. It is literary historical fantasy. You can see like a theme here. I love a bit of fantasy, I love historical fiction, I love literary stuff. What I was most interested in about this book is that it was set in my hometown of Colchester. Although it was like set a couple hundred years ago, there were loads of geographical references to hotels and things on the high street and like villages and areas surrounding it. So I absolutely loved all that kind of referencing. There wasn't a huge amount, I suppose there was a plot, but it wasn't really what you might think. Like, it didn't really end up being anything particularly exciting about this Essex Serpent, but I've just paused there, haven't I? Not said anything. Yes, but it's very slice of life. It basically follows a group of people over the space of a year, a woman who's recently widowed and she moves to the area. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. So that I only had 2 left in hard copy, and then everything else I've either got from the library or got on my Kindle or given back to people I borrowed it from. So my totals for 2024 so far, I have read 37 books, which include the 2 Holly Wilde eroticas. I've read 12,242 pages as of when I wrote these notes, so that was a few days ago. I've mainly read emotional and reflective books. They're medium paced. I read 16% non-fiction and 84% fiction, and I primarily read literary, LGBTQIA+ contemporary fantasy. And my average rating is 4.29. I will probably try and include the stats. I probably just included stats that are slightly different, and that's because that's based on what my Storygraph says now on the 4th of November rather than what it said on the 31st of October, because I've finished The Secret History. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed my October wrap up. I will come back to you probably next week with the books I'm reading in November, which will include a lot of the ones behind me, but I'll maybe talk through my thought process on them and how I'm doing. If you've enjoyed this video and my nonsense and the eclectic taste of erotica / fantasy / historical stuff I read, then please like and subscribe and add comments and give me recommendations. I would love to hear them. Thank you. Bye.